an advantage, the deficit, which is the traditional, I think, Republican issue where he has advantage, but health care. Social issues. A lot of people said, gee, the Democrats talked a lot about abortion and gay marriage at their convention. Why were they doing that? Well, take a look at that, okay? So the advantage that the Democrat enjoys over the Republican on those social issues, on energy, on supporting small business, international affairs. As the Vice President said, his bumper sticker is, Bin Laden's dead and General Motors is alive, okay? So that's, you know, that has something to do with the international education. Even taxes, which typically has been a Republican advantage, because of all that advertising. In particular, I think the tax issue is something where they're fighting pretty well. Medicare, I think the jury's out. They're getting a lot of negative advertising on Medicare from the Republican side. And women's issue, you can see why the Republicans, that tough ad you just saw about women, want to fight back so hard, because it's such an advantage for the president right now. Let me just mention briefly the timeline of events. You know, in campaigns, there are things you can control. How much money you have, what states you go to, where your candidate travels, how you spend it, things like that. And there's things that you can't control. There's some things we know are going to happen. There's going to be 3 presidential debates, a vice presidential debate. We just had 2 conventions. But there's some things that may happen that we don't know will happen. Like in last election when Lehman Brothers collapsed on September 15th, and Senator McCain said the fundamentals of the economy are sound. That didn't resonate with people. Or when I worked for John Kerry, let me tell you, when Osama bin Laden showed up the Thursday before the election in his little gown and the headdress on TV, we were not too pleased about that at the Kerry campaign. And because these events, some of which we know, some of which are unknown, as Secretary Rumsfeld would say, have a real impact on the course of what will happen. We'll see how they emerge. The last thing I want to talk about is probably the most important thing, I think, from the strategist perspective in presidential politics was, listen, how do we get 270 electoral votes? Okay, that's really what it's all about. And right now, the Obama campaign feels they've put out early on their path, the road to victory. And they think there's actually 4 ways for them to get there. And they start with the assumption, I think it's a pretty good assumption, that what we did with John Kerry in 2004 is actually pretty safe terrain right now for the president. If you look at those states, the New England and the Northeast, the upper Midwest and the West Coast, and Hawaii out there, that's 264 electoral votes, or at least it was 264 in 2004. So that's pretty much a base. John Kerry won New Hampshire, Al Gore lost New Hampshire. If we had won New Hampshire with Gore, he would have been elected president, but we lost New Hampshire just by a few thousand votes. Kerry won by a few thousand votes. I don't think it's an accident that yesterday, the day after the convention, Obama and Romney both went to New Hampshire. Okay, it's going to be decided by a handful of votes in a handful of places. But if you start with that premise that, those states, Gore won New Mexico, Kerry lost it. Gore won Iowa, Kerry lost it, but they're very close. If you look at how you can put together 270 this time, well, you can start, as they did in the Midwest path, and basically win Ohio. Okay, where the president's been ahead in a lot of polling, and where the revival of the auto industry, something he had a hand in, has been very helpful to him, in Ohio. There's an expansion path, which early on, which is essentially those western states, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada. At the time, they were talking about Arizona. I think everybody now agrees that's out of reach. But nevertheless, they could lose New Hampshire, they could lose, some of these other states, they could lose Florida, they could lose Ohio, and they could still win the election if they score well out west. In the South, which is really Virginia and North Carolina, if they can do that, the president won North Carolina last time by just a few thousand, it was 14,000 votes. He won North Carolina with 35% of the white vote. He was able to put together a coalition to win that state. It was really remarkable. The only age group that he won in North Carolina were 18 to 29-year-olds. And the only age group he won in Indiana, a state that we'd never competed in previously for generations, was 18 to 29-year-olds. Those 18 to 29-year-olds not only turned out in large number, but they voted so overwhelmingly for him that he was able to change the composition of the electorate and win states that were not in play before, like North Carolina and Indiana. And finally, a western path that, would include, winning in places like Iowa as well. So the Obama campaign sees different paths to victory to get 270 electoral votes. Here's what the sort of pundits say. This is New York Times, and they've got a nice map. That map sort of represents how big the states are and how many electoral votes they have. And they think the race today is a close one. 237 Obama, 206 Romney. And you can see, their target states as well, and the base Democratic states. The Huffington Post, again, A little bit more of a lead for the president here, 247 to 191, but you can see again emerging the West Coast, the Northeast, pretty sound. They're not so sure about the upper Midwest. Real Clear Politics, this is again an aggregate. They take all of the polling from individual states, they just run it on the numbers, and if you run it on the numbers of the most recent polling, the president has an advantage, a little bit of an advantage over Governor Romney. Again, you can see it, you know, fundamentally in the same places. Charlie Cook, who's a political observer, I think is probably one of the best ones. You know, he has a 237 and 206. The West Coast, pretty much Obama. New Mexico, pretty good. You know, Colorado, the Northeast in pretty good shape. And the battlegrounds, you know, basically he's got the same battlegrounds that the Romney campaign does, except I would agree with him that North Carolina may be out of reach this time, even though the president won it last time. But here's the one to go to the bookie with, okay? I'm going to make my prediction right now. I think it's going to be a very close election. You know, we started this presentation with, I guess it was 0.2 of a percentage point separating all of the aggregate tracking polls, okay? We just had, I think we had a great Democratic convention, then we had a lousy job report the next day. That's kind of the yin and yang of what's going on right now. I think if we look at this election, I think the president's going to continue to win the West Coast. We've won that, you know, for, you know, I think 4 or 5 elections in a row. I think he's in very strong shape in Colorado and New Mexico. That Latino vote in New Mexico is going to help him win it. Gore won the state as well. It's a state where Democrats can win it with the right coalition. And in Colorado, I think that, you know, Colorado is a place where, again, the Latino vote is important, but also I think the president's position on a number of social issues and the money they plowed into that place, the effort they have on the ground. They had a great Senate race there in 2010 when Democrats were losing Senate races all over the place, and they were able to win there because of the way they put the coalition together. And finally, I think the other missing piece of this for him to win is Virginia. And I've lived in Virginia now for almost 20 years, and you know, it's really a different place, particularly Northern Virginia, which has emerged as the main population center of the state. Very different than sort of the Old Dominion, a southern state, which Democrats did not win for 40 years until, you know, until Barack Obama showed up and won it. I mean, even President Carter, when he was winning election in many southern states, lost Virginia. President Johnson was the last Democrat before Obama to win Virginia. But I think Virginia's different. It's changed. And I think he's got a really good shot of winning Virginia. If he does this, he's going to get 273 electoral votes. Okay? So why did they go to New Hampshire, both of them? Oh, there's 4 electoral votes in New Hampshire. Okay? 273 minus 4 is 269. Okay? So, you know, so that's how close this thing's going to be, I think. It's going to be a very, very tight, a tough, a hard election, hard fought. And, you know, I think in the end the president is going to win it. I think it's going to be very, very close. The thing could shift in another direction, but I think I'll just sum up by saying, listen, this thing's going to be really tight and hopefully very interesting. As well, the elections for the House and Senate too. I could talk for another hour about that, but I won't. You know, more than anything, the one factor that will have an impact, I think even more than the debates, that will have an impact on the outcome of the election will be the performance of the United States economy in respect to job creation between now and the election. That one number, how many jobs we're creating, will be the debate point more than anything else. And the big advantage that Governor Romney has, and the reason I think the election will be so close, is that because our law now allows unlimited corporate union and individual expenditures, the Republicans are going to have a real advantage because of that. And I think that real advantage will manifest itself. If we start to see the Republicans go on TV, beyond those 8 states that they went on TV yesterday, that means they are the aggressors, and they're going to expand the playing field of states and try to paint the president into an electoral college corner. And if they're successful in doing that, I think they're going to have a real good chance of winning the election. So I'll stop right there and hand it over to
we just have a laptop change now, ladies and gentlemen. I was struck by one phrase that Todd used. He said Obama used his resources advantage in the election. Some might say, in Ireland might use that phrase, he bought the election. Used his resources advantage in the election. Something I'm going to note and keep a thing on. The other thing is, I'm very impressed that Todd stuck his neck on the line in that last slide. In fact, I took out my iPhone and took a picture of that last slide. Pundits sometimes get things wrong, as we know all too well here in Ireland, Gary, isn't that right? But I'll email that to you with a copy of the betting slip. 50% of the proceeds if it goes right, and a bill if it doesn't. What do you call it? You know, you hear a voice regularly on radio or commentary and otherwise commenting on Irish affairs, political affairs, and Anya Kerr was one of the best of them. And they're in a marketplace, not a marketplace is the wrong word, but in a relevant, where there are very few female voices and very few good female voices, because it's something I've tried to address in this summer school, is that I think that there aren't enough female voices, haven't been enough in this summer school, and they never are. There aren't enough available, you have to go looking for them. And I think in part, radio and television producers in Ireland get weak female voices because they feel the need to get female voices, and therefore you have to go mining and find them. And Anya was one of the best in Irish political affairs. And then suddenly you don't hear the voice, and I say, oh, where's she gone? And lo and behold, she's back a little while later talking about the American presidential election, because where I think she has emerged as one of the most informed Irish voices. I'm always conscious of, particularly in Ireland, because of the built-in democratic bias in Ireland, and that there is a failure to understand American elections properly. That was particularly the case on Bush's re-election. I mean, Ireland was literally in shock the day after, because nobody in Ireland had said Bush might win this, which is why the insight Pat has given us, and the fairness he has brought to that analysis, means that we're now forewarned in Ireland that if he has more money, and Republicans have more money, and it's that tight, there's every prospect, every possibility that Romney may win this campaign. I'm obliged, therefore, to Anya, who's now with Storyful.com, known to those who don't follow online media as Mark Little, what Mark Little went off to do when he left prime time, known to those of us who do follow online media and American elections as one of the best gathering places and curators for other outlets, including now YouTube Politics, what's happening online for politics. We're very obliged to her for coming in to Dublin this morning and then getting on the road to come to New Ross. Would you please give New Ross welcome to Anya Kerr.
I am chronically jet lagged, so if my eyes glaze over at some stage and I start slurring my words, forgive me. As mentioned, I'm the political editor with Storyful, and we work for clients all around the world, including the New York Times, ABC, Reuters, and many, many more. But over these last 2 weeks, I was specifically involved with a website, YouTube Politics, and I urge any of you who are politics fanatics when it comes to the US elections that this is a website that is changing the game for politics. So it's youtube.com/politics. And that's where I have lived for these past 2 weeks in Tampa and in Charlotte. And really just for the next 10-15 minutes, I'm just going to talk a little bit about social media because that's what I'm involved in, and also just touch on the conventions. This is our hashtag from now till November. That's where you'll see the conversation about Romney, Obama, generally playing out day to day, character of the two.